Hello everyone and welcome along to a bit of a different one from the TII team tonight. We're not normally on a Friday evening, but there's been so much Rangers news today, we felt that we had to just come on and kind of unpack it all and try and make sense of it all and see where it leaves us. Joining me tonight to have a look at all those transfer bits and pieces, I've got Ross Chalmers and Tommy McIntyre. Ross, first of all, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Friday night, so yeah, you're always feeling better after a week of work, and yeah, strangely feeling some positivity about Rangers again with all these transfer movements. It's been a while, so yeah, I'm looking forward to getting stuck into some of this.
Yeah, our Twitter admin was pretending to work today. I think it's fair to say, given how often and how much the transfer news was coming out of various different sources, none of which were the Scottish media, interestingly enough. But we're also joined by Tommy. How you doing, Tommy?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Scottish media in behind the curve, shocker. They are evidently when it comes to Rangers transfers, but yeah, great start to the weekend, ins and outs, and more to come. Good stuff.
Absolutely, and the start of the season's fast approaching as well. In a week's time, we'll be building up to playing against Hearts at Tynecastle, a game which I was dreading probably about 48 hours ago, just after I watched us take on Birmingham. Maybe slightly less so now, given how much movement there's been, but still, hopefully there's plenty more coming in next week. I think there's only one place to start. There's about 7 or 8 transfers we're going to have to talk our way through over the next hour or so, and please do give us your comments, give us your thoughts. We will bring up as many as we can on the screen and discuss as many of them as possible. But Tommy, first of all, the breaking news just before we came live, great timing from our perspective, was Sam Lammers' departure to, I'm going to go for FC20. I know you're going to correct me on the correct pronunciation of that, but FC20 appears to be a deal roughly £2.5 million plus significant add-ons that could potentially take up to about the €5 million mark, which I think works out about 4.2 million in total. Lammers obviously did well in the Dutch league second half of last season at Utrecht. He was at, I think it was Utrecht. He was at, and that was obviously where a lot of the interest was coming from as well. He's now sealed his deal. His wage demands seem to be putting a lot of teams off, but the deal has been sealed. It's one where, Tommy, he's clearly a talented player, but it just didn't work out for him at Rangers.
Yeah, you're spot on there, and somewhere I'll need to double check if it's FC20 or 20 with my good friend Dennis, who's from the Netherlands. But yeah, as you say, it didn't work at Ibrox. Sam Lammers is a nice guy. He's a good technical player. It just was never going to work in a Rangers jersey, and that's exactly what you're hoping for when a club, takes a brave decision to ship him out, as in get him out on loan. Go and try and prove yourself somewhere. The player grabs that opportunity because Utrecht wanted to keep him permanently as well. He's just decided to go somewhere else. He's grabbed that. He's got a deal. He's brought the money back into the club. Everybody shakes hands and moves on. Right? That's exactly sometimes how transfers play out, and it's good that we've been able to shift them off with, not a huge deficit or anything like that. That's a positive news story for the player, positive news story for the club, positive news story for Niels Koppen and the manager engineering that move in terms of the loan, etc. So yeah, that's actually a really positive one. We shouldn't walk past it because he didn't perform for us. Great to get players off the books and get money in. Fantastic.
Yeah, Ross, it obviously didn't work out for Sam Lammers at Rangers. Why do you think that was? And also, he wasn't with us for pre-season, so we knew that he was going to leave us somewhere down the line, and he was one of the first names on people's lips when we spoke about a rebuild this season. So how positive is it to be able to pretty much get our money back? I think it was 3 million we paid for him last summer, and you're getting 2.5 million plus add-ons, so pretty much work out even, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, why it didn't work? I think you could see straight away. Obviously, Sam Lammers looked quite good in pre-season last year, but once you got into that kind of domestic game, he just couldn't handle the pace of the game, the physicality of the game. And at times he had, and I always think that's one of the worst traits you can have in a footballer, right? So even if you're having a bad game, keep showing for the ball, try and do something, try and contribute to the game. And I think at times Sam Lammers just didn't seem to have the mentality to do that. Look, there's a lot of pressure playing for Rangers. We all know that. But you want players to come in and, really grab that and say, well, I'm going to prove why I should be playing here. And I just don't think we've seen that from Sam Lammers at all. Went back, obviously, to the Netherlands for 6 months there, whatever, 4 months to the end of the season, and did really well. So showed there's a good player there. And the way I always looked at it, I've had this argument all the way through the summer with Sam Lammers. You were never going to get like a silly inflated fee for him. He only had a 4-month period, right? What has he done the last 2 or 3 years? Not a lot. So teams will be looking at and thinking, okay, well, if we do buy this player, he's had a hot streak there, but it's still a risk for us to take the player. So I think Rangers have done really well here with the deal. I think it was around 3.5 million we paid for him last summer. So maybe just a bit above the 3. But yeah, to get back 2.5 million euros rising to 4 million, whatever it is, right? I think Rangers have done really well here. You got to remember the other side of it as well. I'm probably going to mention this several times in this podcast tonight. He came with a big salary. So, you're getting a fee in for the player, but you're also taking a big salary off the books. Like Sam Lammers would have had to be convinced to come and play in Scotland with a big salary. So it's gone. This was one of the deals we had to get done this summer. We could not afford Sam Lammers sitting within the B team at Rangers for another season. It's just that's not possible. So, yeah, I think all round it's a really, really, really good one. I think you just sit. I've said this about another player in the squad, and Cyril Dessers. I think it's one of those deals you get done, you draw a line under it, you move on, you say it didn't work out, and we now go again with this manager and we give him more funds to refresh the squad.
Yeah, we'll potentially come back to Cyril Dessers a bit later in the podcast if we do have time. Steve G says add-ons go up to £4 million for Sam Lammers. Sky Sports are reporting. So for me, that's all in all pretty good business.
Just on that, Ross makes a really good point, and we shouldn't walk past it when we look at that wages point, because that's also Barisic away, Lundstrom away. People who were earning a lot of money, and we can talk about Goldson and stuff like that as well. People who were at the higher earning point within the squad and within the club. So it isn't just a game of transfer fees and ins and outs, as Ross quite says. It's a wider game of, right, what are you shelling out every week? What are you shelling out every month? And then can we get players in who are going to do essentially what those players were doing, which was not a lot sometimes, but for a much lower price point that allows you to then go and get a bit more quality at the top end or whatever in key areas and pay them what they should be getting. So it's a really good all-round transfer, actually.
Yeah, Ross, this seems to be the first of what will be many outgoings. I think we all expected there to be a lot. It's been really slow so far on that front, and it's probably a bit too close to the start of the new season for many of our liking or many of our comfort. But how positive and encouraging, I guess, is it to see that not only is this what is the Sam Lammers one getting over the line, but there's several more which we're about to discuss on this podcast, which are now seeming closer and closer to I guess meeting those requirements that Clement said we had to sell before we can buy. We now see that there seems to be a bit of a pipeline of that going to happen over the coming days. How positive and encouraging is that for us as fans, I guess?
Yeah, it's really encouraging. I think we've all been frustrated as support in the past that we've felt that Rangers maybe haven't done enough business and they haven't been willing to sell players maybe at the peak value that we've seen. Obviously, this is a little bit different, and a lot of these players just aren't good enough to be here anymore. And look, it's tough to move players out. I think I mentioned this when I was on the podcast last. A contract has two sides of it. A player comes here, he signs a contract. He can sit here if he wants, right? He can do that. That's up to him. He signed the deal. So it's not easy for the club to move these guys on. It takes a bit of time. The Euros obviously had an impact in this as well. It was always going to slow down business. I mean, Černý was playing for the Czech Republic in the Euros, right? So it always slows down these deals. Clubs are obviously back in now. They're looking at their squad. Everyone's back. Most are back, other than the guys that were playing maybe the semi-finals and the finals. And they're looking at where we need to strengthen and where we need to let players go. So it's starting to move. And I think Rangers are just joining that now. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of movement, obviously, that will come onto them. But Sam Lammers was one of the big ones because, like I said before, the salary he was on. And it was so clear before the season even finished that Rangers wanted rid of Sam Lammers. I mean, it was in the press that he had no future at Rangers. I remember there was a debate whether he could come back and he could make an impact. And Rangers made it pretty clear in the media that he did not have a future here, right? So you're letting everyone know early that we want rid of this guy. So yeah, I think it's good that we've got the ball rolling now. There's a lot of players in that squad, like I said, that aren't good enough. Sam Lammers is one of them, and I wish him all the best for the future. I hope he goes on, he kicks on again in his career, and he gets to another level. But we just weren't the right club for him, so it's good that we can get this deal done and we move on.
Yes, well, let's move on to another player that you mentioned there, Ross, and thankfully it's an incoming. It is on loan. We do seem to have been linked with a lot of loan moves so far this week. But it's Vaclav Cerny has officially joined Rangers today on a season-long loan from Wolfsburg. He's a left-footed right winger, which will be music to the ears of many. Some people, some of the older traditionalists might hate that, but he's a left-footed right winger. And Tommy, it looks like we finally got a right winger that can maybe do something for us.
Yeah, I mean, I won't run through all these stats or react to that comment overly, right? But I think the manager's been very clear that the support en masse knew that we needed something in that space anyway. And not to walk past the fact that as Lammers goes out, we bring in a player of real quality as well. So there's a kind of dynamic shift there. But yeah, listen, he's a really good player. I won't run through his stats in terms of everywhere he's been because I'm just not particularly interested in running through the list too much. But there's no purchase option. There's no obligation with this particular transfer. But more importantly for me, what does he fit? Fits what the manager has identified, and he fits what Niels Koppen has been talking about as well. When you think about consistently, the manager and Niels Koppen have been talking about players who've got, proven technical skills, versatility, because Černý can play in one or two different positions. They've also been at top European leagues. Černy's just coming out of the Bundesliga, etc. The club have emphasised that strategic approach to high technical players, athleticism. If you look at Černy's injury background, it's pretty clean as well. And then looking at players that can bring that experience in, whilst obviously having, the ability to play across attacking areas and be an asset. So I think as we look at the profile of Černý, we're seeing that second part of the transfer strategy because Koppen and the manager have spoken about younger players like Enciala, etc. coming in. But Černy's more of that, yes, we'd love him to be a permanent player for us. And you never know what happens. Just because there's no obligation clause doesn't mean it couldn't happen at the end of the season. But he's more of that Diomande kind of style, I think, in terms of he's a real talent. And you would expect that if you can get him on the books, you can then go and make a sale from him, etc. So, yeah, I think he's a really promising one, actually. But again, like a lot of players, he's maybe a close akin to Jack Butland here. He's maybe looking for that home to really go and show what he's able to do because his career's a little bit spotty in that. But he certainly maximises the profile that we've been talking about in Koppen and Clermont. And the reason I go back to that is we're seeing that come out now. And we're seeing that level of player come in. And then it's about making sure that we get the best out of him. So I would expect that he's coming in as a jersey kind of holder. And it'll be up to the likes of McCausland, etc., to try and move him out or kind of play inside that. But yeah, I think it's quite an exciting one and somebody who could really, really fill a problem positions for us.
Yeah, Ross, before I come to you, a couple of comments. RFC72 says finally got a replacement for Candeas. Which was what I guess I was probably hinting at, but not wanting to say. And then
trying to stay away from it. I was never going to mention Candeas. I was going to leave that for somebody else. So I'm glad that somebody else jumped in.
Steve G says Černý is great business loan without any obligation or option isn't a bad thing in this situation. He can come in and do a job for a season, a job on that right wing we haven't had for years. Ross, Tommy didn't delve into the stats. I know you enjoy a good stat. Černý. Obviously, I think in the Bundesliga last year, didn't really pull up any trees, which is probably why Wolfsburg are willing to let him go out on loan. But the season before he joined Wolfsburg in the Eredivisie, he was really impressive, goals and assists wise. He's also scored against Celtic at Celtic Park before, which will quickly endear him to a lot of Rangers fans. But is it one that excites you?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that those comments were kind of about Candeas because that's all I was thinking about as well. We can finally let that go now, innit? We don't need to hear that line ever again. I'm sick of hearing it. So thankfully we can move on from that. Yeah, this looks a really good bit of business, I think, again. Good profile player, only 26. Tommy made a good point there. He had a bit of a dip, so he's maybe looking for a home again to try and push himself on. Not every single loan that we do has to have an obligation or an option to buy. It's not realistic. And the thing I always say about the loan market is if you can go and get a player that enhances your squad and takes your squad to another level and it's in the loan market, you do it. We don't have the the budget to be going and buying every single player that we bring into the club. That's just something we have to always be looking at in the loan market. And we've had success in the loan market. So I think it's a really good bit of business. Like you said, maybe not the best year last year in the Bundesliga. I think he spoke about that in his interview, and he was just saying, it was a bit different. It was a bit of a step up from where he'd been, so maybe struggled with that step up. Doesn't mean he can't make the step up eventually, but maybe just came a bit too soon for him. And yeah, his record at 20 was good. I think it was 13 goals and 11 assists or something like that. I don't know if that was maybe over 2 years though, but it is a good return. And I think that's something we've needed for a long time in the team on that right-hand side. Someone that can contribute numbers from that area. We've just not had it. You could argue we've not had it in the left, but I think Sima probably gave us that last year, right? So I like this move because even though he is only 26, he is an experienced player. He's been around enough now, so you're not bringing in someone that's a young profile again, and you got to give them time to bed in. I think once he's fit, he's a definite starter, right? So he's going to play every single week. I think Ross McCausland will be behind him. I think that, again, is good for Ross McCausland because I don't think Ross McCausland is ready to play every single week for Rangers. So having someone ahead of him that he can learn from and he can push him, that's great. So I think that'll help develop Ross McCausland more. And also on the other side, Cortez is young, right? I think we all think he's going to be the main starter on the left-hand side. Takes the pressure off him a little bit in terms of numbers, how many goals or assists he needs to get. You've got someone on the other side that's maybe going to pick that up for you, and it gives him time to kind of bed in. Like we said, he had a bad injury last year, so it's going to take him a bit of time as well. So I think all round it's a really good move. I think the support are, aligned on this. We felt we've needed something in that area for a long time. I mean, look at the players over the last few years. We've been playing in those areas. Joe Rebo was playing there. Scott Arfield was playing there. We've tried everyone out there. So I'm thankful with that at this point now that we can just let Černý come in, play in the position he's used to, and we can kick on. But yeah, I really, really like it. I think as soon as the links came in, I was really happy to see it, and I'm glad Rangers got it over the line.
I won't laugh away at myself there, but I'm thinking, I'm pretty sure one other player we tried out there was Todd Cantwell.
But yeah, got hooked after 30 minutes. Yeah,
we'll come on to that as well. Yeah, I was just going to say, we seem to have a right winger and a left winger, and Černý and Cortez now, and I won't mention the injury word anymore during this podcast. Tommy, as I said, we've got sort of one starting right winger, one starting left winger there. It's encouraging that we've strengthened those positions because it felt like the forward line was needing a full revamp. So that's at least a start for us. A lot of people in the comments are kind of discussing where does that leave the Sima deal or the appetite to push through a deal for Sima. How do you think it impacts it at all, or do you reckon that interest is probably still there?
I think the interest is absolutely still there. I think if Rangers could make that one work, they would. Do I think it will get over the line? I'm not entirely convinced. I would definitely bring that down the pecking order. I don't think Černý coming in massively changes the appetite to have Abdullah Sima as a permanent Rangers player, but it's pretty much a Brighton thing at this point in time, and I'm not entirely sure that we're aligned in any close regard when it comes to numbers. So you never know. I would love to see Sima back at Ibrox. I think he's a player with great potential. He can do a job, and he's got, he ticks the box of make a potential profit on him. But I'm not entirely convinced that we will see that one. But yeah, listen, we go back to, let's not dwell on, or take that as any sort of detriment to Černý. This is a good move for the club. You're absolutely right in terms of what we're saying in the comments and here. Not every deal has to come with an obligation. I'm just clarifying that there isn't one in there. But we've brought in an experienced international. I think 17 caps for Czech Republic or something like that. There you go. I did get a stat in at some point. Ross will pull me up for that later on. But, played in good leagues, ready to do something, comes and fills a problem area for us. And, all we're doing is picking up some wage. That's a pretty good place to be and allows funds to be used for somewhere else. And I think that's the bigger picture here as we see more and more players edging towards the exit door. And again, the manager had hinted at this as well, that wait until the Euros are gone, wait until we're doing all the things. And I say this all the time, and I know as a support, any support, we want to see lots in and out, but judge it in its entirety at the end of the window.
I think that's a difficult thing, and I think we spoke about it on last week's podcast around you just get in that mindset, and it's a Steven Gerrard mindset that's kind of drilled into everyone that you have to have your players there before the Champions League qualifiers, before the start of the season. And you kind of, if they come in later than that first game of the season, you think the club's failed because they've they've not brought in the players in time to impact that start of the season. It's even worse if you drop any points in that opening month, because the focus immediately turns to, well, the club didn't do the transfer business quick enough. But like you say, Tommy, we probably do have to be patient, especially in a year where there's been a major international tournament.
That's it. I don't disagree with you, and I get all that point, and I suffer from it as well. I'm not a hypocrite, right? I want everybody in the door. I want the team really settled and drilled, and then we go into it because it's such an important thing. But you can't be hanging about outside clubs with a transit van and a big net and just whipping players that you want into the back of it and them turning up in a Rangers jersey. So it's not quite how it works. There's checks and balances. Although I'm sure if we could try it, we'd probably do it, right? But that's where we are. There's a lot of component parts, and ultimately it comes down to players, it comes down to other teams. And so now we are starting to see the wheels moving a wee bit quicker, and it's a positive move. Players out, money in, players in, still more to come. It's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, players that we can make a profit from potentially is a real positive. So let's move to another one that kind of came out of the blue, and I actually forgot he was a Rangers player, to be fair. But Jose Cifuentes appears to be moving to Ianis in Greece. I'm not going to try and say the second part of that team name, but it seems to be a season-long loan with an obligation to buy for €5 million, 4.2 million euros. He was a highly rated player when he came to Rangers. He famously said he didn't like it because it was cold. He never seemed to get up to speed with the Scottish game at all. I don't think in a Rangers jersey he ever quite got up to speed or up to the standards we saw him playing for LAFC. Ross, this seems to be a deal that surprised a lot of people, particularly the fee. What are your views on it? It seems a good move all round yet again.
Yeah, I am surprised by how high the fee is. €5 million is a lot of money for someone that has came in and really hasn't performed for Rangers at all. He's then went on loan to Cruzeiro, I think. Is that how you pronounce it in Brazil? And he hasn't really done anything there either. Now there's
right, by the way. I'm sitting out every time.
I don't think that one's right, but I think everyone they'll know who I'm talking about. Cifuentes is a strange one because we definitely got him for lower than his actual value, right? Because he was coming towards the end of his contract. I think the fee that we paid was €1.5 million, which actually I think is quite a lot of money for someone that 6 months left of their deal, and probably shows you how highly Rangers at the time valued the player, and that they obviously felt they were getting a player here for less than he was actually worth. So maybe we shouldn't be too surprised that even though he's came in and he's not done well, there's still value in the player. We've seen him do quite a bit in MLS. He's an international, he's Ecuadorian international. So maybe we shouldn't be shocked. But when I seen it today, I was like, that can't be right, surely. But yeah, Cifuentes is another one. I think we actually covered the PSV game together, Craig, last year in the qualifier. And if you remember, I was saying at the full half, he was out of his depth. He was lost. He just could not handle the pace of the game. Now, I don't know if anyone's watched any MLS football, but it's slow. Like, it's slow football. And he just never seemed to be able to get into the rhythm to play here. Like I said about Sam Lammers, just very, very similar. Just struggled as soon as he was here. And I think Clement just wasn't convinced by him at all. He played away in Betis, if you remember that night. He played quite well. And I think a lot of people felt at that point, okay, well, this boy's come in, he's been given a chance. Got a bit of a run in the team. And then I think he was sent off at home. I can't remember who it was against, but he was sent off, if I remember correctly.
St Mirren?
It might have been. I think it might. I can't remember if it got rescinded. Someone might be able to tell me. I can't remember. Anyway, he gets sent off at home and he just never came back. So, look, again, Rangers will be looking at it. They've maybe felt that the player is going to have to cut his loan short, and early and come back, and they'd have to try and integrate him back into the squad. But thankfully, they've received an offer and they let him go. And again, it's one of those ones. I'm sure he's on a pretty good salary. So if he's not got a future here, Clement isn't sold by him. It's not his player. He didn't bring him in. Move on. I guess a really, really good fee. You're starting to look at all these fees being rumoured in the last couple of days and thinking we have a bit of a kitty here ready to go. It's not as simple as that, of course. Rangers have had to reduce the wage budget this summer. So I'm not expecting Rangers to go out and just spend like 10 million on a player. It's not going to happen, but it is good to get budget in, can go again. And Cifuentes is just one of those ones again where you look at it and go, he just had to be moved on. He was never ever going to make it here.
Yeah, RFC 72 saying it was Dundee, he was sent off and it was never a sending off.
I thought it was Aberdeen. I thought it was
See,
Aberdeen.
I think the conclusion is none of us know, so we can just move on. We can just move on.
Well, it's probably a bigger point about that's probably all he ever did. He's a victim of not being able to land his jersey, and so he's been rightly moved out. Rangers need to be absolutely ruthless with this type of thing, and not just keep playing the potential card. You didn't land anything. You didn't seem to integrate well enough into the club. Whatever's happened, there's an offer on the table. Pretty much we want you out the door and you're somebody else's problem. That is not a bad streak to have somewhere within the side of the club at a certain point in time. Wish him well. Not our problem anymore as soon as he's signed for another club.
Can I just jump in there? Because that's a really important point that Tommy's making here. And I think sometimes we get caught up in this as fans, and we always look at a signing. We think, okay, we've signed him for this fee. We're going to bring him in. We're going to develop him. We're going to sell him for this fee. That's obviously the ideal model. But I think the bit we forget sometimes is they also have to perform when they're here. Like, you're not going to get that fee if they don't perform. So really what you should be focused on initially is the player good enough to play for Rangers and make an impact? And I think we've seen earlier that Jose Cifuentes just maybe wasn't suited for our domestic game. And also in the Champions League qualifiers, I just thought you are miles off it. So Tommy's bang on. If we've then put him out on loan to try and, maybe when he's saying things are, he didn't like the cold weather and things, maybe it was difficult for him to settle as well from a personal level. So we've tried to help that. We've moved him to maybe an environment that he thinks he can kick on in. It's not worked out for him there. Rangers might just be looking at it and going, we've got a pretty decent offer on the table here. I think we just cut ties, we just move on. It's not worked out. Wish everyone all the best. But that is something I think as a support, of course, the player trading model is really important for us. It's crucial, right? We have to start getting into that. It can't just be like this every single summer where you're trying to sell players off at a lower value, right? We have to bring players in and develop them, but they've also got to perform when they're here. It can't just be that, oh, look at this guy's 20 years old. Oh, I can't wait he'll come in, he'll play here for 3 years and we'll sell him for 20 million. They've got to do it first. And unfortunately he didn't, so you move him on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Cifuentes very much falls into the Sam Lammers category of clearly has some talent and is a good footballer, just not suited to Scottish football or to Rangers. And it seems to be the way that we've recruited last year seems to have just been a lot of players have fallen into that category. And I'm sure we'll speak about a few more as we go through the podcast. Right, let's jump back over to the incomings side of things. Plenty of people in the comments. As a rumour that I hadn't seen at all today. Steve G said private jet phone in from Malaga last minute to Glasgow.
I love these type of rumours. They're the best.
People are straight on Skyscanner tracking the fight the whole way. But yeah, apparently it appears to be a player that Rangers are interested in. No confirmation of who that player is, but it would suggest, and going by some reports in Spain today as well, that Joan Jordan is potentially that very man, the Sevilla defensive midfielder, 29 years old. Reports today from the Spanish media suggested that Sevilla want 60% of his wages paid, plus an obligation to buy at the end of the loan for between £2.5 million and £4 million written into it. So I guess those are terms dependent on the wages, because I think he was rumoured to be on €75,000 a week. Roughly, which is well above what we can even consider, even with the amount of outgoings that we've had. To me, to be honest, Tommy, I think this one looked dead, especially when we were linked with Hannibal Mejbri from Manchester United in the same position as a loan. To me, that felt that the Joan Jordan one was kind of disappearing over the horizon, but it seems to have been reignited today. If he was to come in, is he one that would excite you?
Yeah, I mean, well, excites me, a pejorative term, but I was trying to swiftly conduct in my mind there some way that I could get a pun out of Hannibal, but it's somebody else that's crossed the Alps. That's a very niche one out there for any history buff, right? But yeah, I mean, ultimately we need more steel in that midfield, right? That's the non-glib point. Everybody knows that midfield needs retooled, so to speak, right? And if you're getting a player who's more established in terms of Jordan, and who's got a background there and can be a ball player but can also have a physicality into his game, I would probably, at this position where we are right now, prefer that to Hannibal. I mean, I'd take both of them in all honesty, but if we can get more experience into that midfield and really showed it up, and then you're thinking about that kind of Diomande, Raskin coming back in as well, then that starts to really retool an area that, alongside our forward line, absolutely needed to be worked on right now. And these are, it's a player coming in with a certain level of pedigree. I don't think he's played a hell of a lot in La Liga. I think it's maybe 10, 12 games. It might be slightly less.
I think he did the previous 3 seasons. He played pretty much every game for Sevilla. Just the last season, he seems to have fallen away from first team.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so in terms of last season, I don't know if that was. I have to admit, I don't know if that was just a replacement. I don't think there's any large-scale injuries in his background, but I'm happy to be kind of spoken about that. I had a very quick look at some of his background before the podcast. But again, it's a player who fits the model that I was just explaining earlier on, which is played at a high level in Europe. So integration should probably be slightly easier. Has got technical ability and athleticism. Is able to slot directly in. Gives you something in an area that we are really after. Right. And the reason I keep getting back to that point is there's been a couple of times where you've looked at Rangers over the last couple of years and we've went and got a player for an area that we didn't really need when there's other areas crying out for investment. Now, what we're doing is we're going after areas that are quite clearly, in the manager's view, of having to show up. Now, I think Jordan's got a lot of skills and he would bring a hell of a lot. So if he's the player that we're bringing in and Hannibal slips out of the equation, fine, I can live with that. It's not a bad kind of fallback if we can get the Hannibal deal as well. But yeah, I think he does. It probably does excite me, but more so I really want to see a refreshed Philippe Clement midfield, because he tends to get a lot out of that. He expects it to be dynamic. There is a lot of athleticism and box-to-box quality there in it, and he's getting the ability to retool that. So that's what I'm really excited about. Will we see finally an absolute put-together Philippe Clement midfield as we start next season? Because we absolutely need it.
Ross, the midfield is one of many areas of the team that give me the fear heading into the start of the season. But I think how easily even teams like Birmingham during the week, a League One team, easily played through the centre of our midfield with 1 or 2 passes was alarming, to say the least. I think John Lundstrom obviously played a particular role for us last year. Whether he did it well or not, I guess, is probably up for debate. But he played that particular role where he was supposed to sit behind the central midfielders, control the tempo, put out fires, and win us the ball back and pass it on to the players who can potentially do a bit more. It seems like Joan Jordan and Hannibal, to an extent, while at opposite ends of their career, they're both kind of set up as that style of player. How important is it that we do get a player like that in, and how will that help us, in your opinion? How will that help us kind of shore up that midfield area defensively?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is I'm not convinced Hannibal and Joan Jordan are very similar here. I actually think Hannibal's more of an attacking-minded midfielder. I think he's someone that plays a bit further forward. I think what Hannibal brings you, and a lot of the kind of scout reports I've read on him, he's very aggressive. So that's something we do need in midfield. I think we can all say we're lacking that. I think Connor Barron's brought that in pre-season. I think we see a difference in the midfield when Connor Barron's there. Very good at covering space, but that's only one. Diomande is good at kind of intercepting and things, but again, he's not that type of player. So I think we do need another player in there. Joan Jordan, I'm not completely convinced by this move, I'll be honest with you. It seems quite a risk. It seems like quite an expensive deal. If you're already sitting on €70,000 a week and you're bringing him in on a loan with an obligation to buy, so that's what, 2 or 3 million you're going to buy him, and then he's got to agree a contract to come and play here after, right? So he's got to sign that deal before, if it's an obligation to buy. How much are you going to be paying this guy to come? We've just said that we don't really want to be investing huge wages in players of 29, 30-year-olds. So I'm not completely convinced by this move. I'll be honest, I think he's a good player from what I've seen, not doubting the ability. But is there maybe someone else out there that we could go for that would fulfill that kind of type of midfielder? Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. It's worth saying as well, I've seen reports today that Rangers have agreed a deal with Sevilla, around 60% of his salary covered, but Joan Jordan is not convinced of the move. He doesn't want to move to Rangers. That just doesn't seem like that would be a possibility to me, because why, if you don't get the green light from a player, why would you spend your time trying to negotiate with a club? So that report from Spain doesn't really make sense to me at all. Does Joan Jordan maybe have other options that you prefer? Yeah, maybe. That's fine. That's football. I'm not going to get hung up on that. But this whole idea that Rangers are going to sit and try and negotiate with Sevilla and then they're going to go and ask the player whether he wants to come, that's not modern day football. That doesn't happen. The player would have signed this off before the talks even initiated. So I'd put that one down as nonsense. But overall, if we just look at that type of midfielder, that is exactly what we need. Now, whether that means that Philippe Clement's going to change his midfield setup and he's going to go to maybe a 3 in there instead of a number 10, I'm not sure. It doesn't look like that, I'll be honest. And that, I think you said earlier, you've got the fear about a lot of the positions. That right there is where I've got the fear. Because I think you can bypass our kind of the kind of forward area of the midfield, the number 10, the striker, whatever, the first area of the press. I think you can bypass that really easy. I think you've seen that all night against Birmingham. And we're not talking about a high-level team here. We're talking about a League One side in England. And they bypassed us. They just played through us constantly. And I'm fine with teams playing through you if you force them wide, right? But they're coming through the centre of the park. So we've got a problem there. That needs to be addressed within the next 7 days. Because if you go to Tynecastle and you set up that way, Hearts will beat us in the first game of the season. There's no doubt about it. They have a squad that is strong enough to put us under pressure. We've seen it at the end of the last season as well. So that's something we need to address. Like I said, a Connor Barron and Mohamed Diamandi, they look like two great players for us. I really like that kind of combination. But I do think we need another player in there, a Joan Jordan, a Czech Niasse, a Kenny McLean, someone in there that can kind of sit at the base of that midfield, maybe like what Lundstrom done, and can do it to a bit of a higher level than we've seen last season. Yeah,
Tommy, how important is it? I guess we spoke about the fact that Joan Jordan is 29, Hannibal's 21, very different areas and times in their career. How important is it that we bring a bit of experience into that midfield mix that we've got there? Because obviously you've got Barron in there, you've got Raskin, you've got Diomande. They've all played football at a decent level, but they are still pretty young in terms of the number of games they've played, in terms of their career. How important is it that we just bring in that bit of experience? Ross spoke about a Kenny McLean, for example, at 32 years old. Just that wise old head that can just marshal it from a defensive perspective and just almost let the younger guys just push forward and do what they're good at.
Yeah, I think experience is really important. And you do want to have that. It's particularly important in the circumstances we find ourselves in, because if you look around the dressing room, we've let some big experienced senior leaders go. So whether the actual leaders, right, is up for debate given how they were performing, right? But your, Barisic, experienced player, your Lundstrom, you look at Goldson maybe going out the door as well. You think these are big personalities in the dressing room, and so other people will need to come in and help some of the younger players that we've signed, and people like Barron and all that, to help them get through the difficult moments, because you're not just managing on the field, but you're also managing the pressures and the expectation that come for the stands, particularly if things don't start well. And lots of players can go right under, including senior ones, right? So that's probably the difference. And I think Ross is right, actually, up to a sensible point of Hannibal and Jordan are not like for like players. I think that's a very fair point, right? But if I was only getting one, I'm going to go with Jordan. And one of the elements that tips it over for me is the experience as well, because not every signing that's coming in can be a project. We need players who are absolutely fundamentally going to have been there and done it and bring something straight in. And so that's why I think he's a useful player. When it comes to the money, etc., and everything has to be with an appetite of what we're spending, right? But in terms, if you look at it from the other side as well, what are we significantly lacking? I think the only person I'd probably point out that maybe Ross missed there at that base is, naturally you would think Raskin is going to do that. Right? Now, he didn't perform last season, so there's a question mark over him, but you would think he's a natural made person for that, and his ability to read the game at the bottom end and intercept is actually pretty good. And that's before we think of a Dujon Sterling also adding a little bit of athleticism and power and pace into that midfield, if that's where he plays as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of things in the mix there, but I don't think any of us and anybody in the comments, listening and watching, disagrees that we absolutely need better quality of bodies in there, maybe another two, including the one we're talking about, to get us to a place where that midfield can fundamentally do a job And that's notwithstanding the fact that in the 10 space, we've still got guys like Tom Lawrence and all that. So there is quite a lot of bodies who can play in there. It's just whether they can play to the standard that we need this season, as opposed to the suboptimal stuff that we got last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd really like us to bring in some experienced heads at this moment in time. I feel like this transfer window has been focused a lot on bringing in the prospects, the ones that could potentially come in, develop, and make us a bit of money. I think now what the squad is lacking, especially with the players that are signposted to leave or have already started to leave, is that experience and that the people that can take charge of a game or take a game by the scruff of the neck and just get it back under control. I think we're missing that in these moments. I think we saw it towards the end of last season. That was especially exactly what we were missing in those bigger games and those bigger moments. So that's exactly what I want to see us do over the coming weeks, or preferably the coming 7 days, if possible. Let's jump back to the other side of the fence, I guess, and talk about outgoings. Again, some more rumours. I'm just going to run through these pretty quickly, and each of you can give your opinion. Ross, I'll start with you. Ianis Hagi, first of all, linked with a return to Fiorentina. I didn't actually realise he'd been there beforehand, but I linked a return to Fiorentina, 2.1 million plus a 10% sell-on. When he first arrived, I thought he was a player that would go for...
I'm laughing at that dog in the comments section as well. I am laughing.
Yeah, I think the dog's not too happy with something in the garden, but it's too far away for me to actually give him any trouble. So there we go. £2.1 million plus 10% sell on for Hagi, a player I thought would go for much more. Connor Goldson, Philippe Clement hinted that, or I think it was more less subtle than a hint, that a bid for Connor Goldson had been accepted the other night when he spoke around the Birmingham game. He said a deal. It was somewhere not too far away, which I think a lot of people kind of led to think it was Birmingham that he was actually going, because they'd previously been linked with him. A report from a trusted journalist in Cyprus says that he is now linked up with the Aris Limassol squad, and that he was having his medical today with the transfer imminent. So it does look like that is potentially where he's going. That could change, but it does look like Connor Goldson's out the door pretty soon, and that's, like we spoke about earlier in the podcast, another big wage off the wage bill. Ross, what are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I'll start with Connor Goldson. Fantastic servant. I think I said that about Tavernier the other night. Connor Goldson's been a great player for Rangers. I know in the last year he's struggled, and I think the injuries that he had the season prior, I think he had got a bad injury in pre-season last year, didn't he? And I think he's came back from that, and he's just never looked the same. And unfortunately, that happens to a player that's playing week in, week out. Eventually, it will catch up with you physically, and I think we've seen that from Connor Goldson last year. But I don't want us to forget what had happened the previous 4 or 5 years with Connor Goldson. He was immense. He really was immense. You know, that season we won 55. He was the rock at the back. Connor Goldson played every single week. It was either a Hollander or a Balogun that played with him, but it was him. And he was a leader. And for anyone that's ever been and watched the Rangers at Ibrox, you can hear Connor Goldson every single game. So I've been a big fan of Connor Goldson. I think I said this the other night, I don't think any centre-back we've brought in has got anywhere close to Connor Goldson, to be honest with you. And I actually don't think our centre-backs are as bad, maybe, as some people make out. But I still don't think they're anywhere close to Connor Goldson at his peak. And obviously part of that Europa League run as well, you know, he was a rock at the back in Europe. So he's been a great player for us. I think sometimes we get caught up in the kind of recency and we find it hard to look past it. And I agree with a lot of the support. It is time he moves on. It's time. You know, he's on a huge salary, like we spoke about before. It's clear that Philippe Clement doesn't consider him his first choice centre-back. I think he would have been happy to have him in the squad. I think he made that clear the other night, part of the pre-season. He said, look, he was going to start this game. It's not like he's been bombed out or anything. But obviously Connor Goldson's had an offer. He doesn't want to be a bit part player, and he wants to go and play football. So fair play to him. Wish him all the best. I've really enjoyed watching him over the years. I know he's had some clangers, but I always say if you're a centre-back playing for Rangers, you probably are going to make mistakes, because if you weren't, you would be playing for us, right? That's just the way you got to look at it. So, yeah, that I'll be sad to see him go. The same as James Tavernier. If he moves on, I'll be sad to see him go, but it's probably the right time. Ianis Hagi, again, looked really, really good, especially in that 55 season under Gerrard. It's always maybe just lacked that little bit of pace to maybe go to the next level. Hagi, really good technical footballer, someone again that could get you numbers, which is something we've cried out for. And at times he's been played out of position. He's been played off the right at times, or he's been played a little bit deeper, should I say. But that injury he picked up in the January a couple of years ago has just completely set him back, unfortunately. I mean, we've seen this loan spell last year at Alaves. He didn't really do a lot, unfortunately. So, again, I'm not really sure Ianis Hagi's even going to get back to the level we've seen him at Rangers. So, if you're being offered $2 million to move him on, you get a sell-on fee in there, and maybe you hope he kicks on again, you make something off it, I think you let him go. So, yeah, again, 2 deals I'm not really upset about. I think they're deals that Rangers have to do, but I think both players should be remembered fondly because they were part of a good team, and wish them all the best.
Yeah, Tommy, I mean, I agree with Ross in terms of Goldson standing. I've received a lot of stick on this podcast for how often I've defended Connor Goldson, even when he's made mistakes. I think he's been a great player for Rangers over his time. Some people in the comments are saying he stayed 2 seasons too long. I'd probably say he stayed 1 season too long, and last summer was probably the right time. His contract had ran out, and Rangers were obviously keen to not lose him for nothing. And we didn't have anyone. I didn't think anyone could replace him at that moment in time, and in that position. So he obviously signed the new deal. What's your thoughts on Goldson and Hagi's departures?
Yeah, I mean, I won't duplicate everything that's been said there, but he got a new dawn in his career because it wasn't really going anywhere at Brighton and came to Rangers. By and large, our best centre back that was on the books for a significant period of time. Right, every player makes mistakes, and you can question mentality and all that. Enjoyed. Should have won more, but that's the entire squad and the club as a whole. And his time here, enjoyed one really big day in the sun. Right, got the one that everybody wanted and everybody talked about, and we took it home. And now the sun sets on his career. Wish him all the very best. Brings in a fee for the club. That's it. Connor Goldson should be looked at as a really good player, who performed really, really well in a title-winning team, and then performed so-so in some other elements of a team that should have done better, by and large. But as a servant to the club and what he gave us, yeah, I think you can only look positively at it. He goes away with a title winners medal, and he brings a fee into the club. Full stop. Ianis Hagi, great name. Wish him all the best. Which probably tells you what I think about Ianis Hagi.
Yes, I think that I was going to say. I think that says what you really think about Ianis Hagi. Ross, Connor Goldson was the first name on the team sheet in many of the years throughout his Rangers career. Even last year, he would start every game he was fit for up until the last couple of weeks of the season. It leaves a gap at centre half. At the moment, you're probably choosing between John Suter, Ben Davies, and Leon Balogun as for your centre defensive partnership. None of which really fill me with a lot of happiness at this stage. Who do you think will play centre half, and do you think that's an area we'll have to invest in?
Yeah, we definitely need to invest in a centre half. That goes without saying. I would be quite happy to see John Suter take the right centre-back slot for this season, because I think that's John Suter's best position. So I would be fine with him playing that role this season, and maybe try to see if John Suter can go to another level with us, because I think at times he's struggled, and I think playing on that left side, I don't think it's critical that you have a left footer on the left side. By the way, I'm not one of those that think that, but it must be uncomfortable playing there. So he played for Hearts on the right-hand side most of the time before he came to us. So it'd be good to see him given a chance. I think we've all felt that John Suter he's a good player. So I'd like to see him play there. I think on the left side, I said this earlier, I don't think Ben Davies is anywhere near as bad as a lot of the support think. But I don't think at the same time, I don't think he's good enough to be the guaranteed starter every single week. And again, you've got to look at that and say, well, he's on a big salary, as we've led to believe. So again, you can't have someone on a salary like that playing backup at Rangers. So that's probably one we're going to have to try and move on. Unless Clement looks at him and thinks I can get something out of him, then fair enough. Manager's allowed to obviously look at it that way. But I think he's one I'd like to try and move on. So yeah, we're going to have to recruit in that area, because Leon Balogun, really, for me, the way I'm looking at it, Leon Balogun should be at best fourth choice, but really a fifth choice. He should be someone that's in and around the squad and can fill in from time to time, right? That's the age he's at now. I think we've seen when Leon Balogun gets a run of games, he usually picks up an injury, right? So he shouldn't really be one of the four for me. Is this an opportunity to try and move a King in? I'm not convinced of that. I don't know if King's ever going to make that jump now. He's been around the squad for a while. So, yeah, Rangers will definitely have to go into the market for a centre-back. What slightly worries me with that is I've not seen us linked with any since maybe the first week of the window. So I don't know if we're looking at it as I don't know if the club are looking at that area in the same way the sport are. But I'd like to think once Connor Goldson goes, I think you've made a good point there. It's a huge gap, right? Huge, because he's been someone that's played week in, week out for us over the last few years. It's also a huge salary. I don't know how many times I'm going to say this. A huge salary off the books. Probably the top earner at the club, I would imagine, Connor Goldson, when he got that new deal to keep him here. So there should be a lot of room now for Rangers to go out and sign one, maybe two centre-backs. Whether that is a permanent and you then bring someone in on loan as well, that could work. I've seen the likes of Harry Souttar linked the last couple of days again. So is that someone we could move for in a loan move and then you go and buy someone on a permanent move that's maybe a wee bit younger in profile? I don't know, but it's certainly an area they're going to have to strengthen or we're in trouble.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw a couple more names into the mix. We've covered them at length over the period. James Tavernier, apparently Gio's back in for him, and they're expecting a bid to come in the next few days for James Tavernier. So very much Turkey is still an option for him. Cyril Dessers we covered at length. Todd Cantwell is another fluke made clear. Still a bizarre thing when you watch that press conference and that clip back. The fact that he leaves the press conference, he's clearly thinking about it, and he just thought, right, I'm just going to throw him under the bus and let everyone know what's really
all
happening.
The hallmarks of somebody who just had enough.
Yeah.
Of someone and thought, you know what, I'm going to walk away, because when he's come out of that press conference, he's got the media team in his ear, right? Get back in, get on the bus, pack it away, and all that. No, I'm getting back in there. Are you sure that's what you want to do, Philippe? Too late. I'm already in. I'm sitting there. I'm going to give them the update about. So it had a hands washed kind of feel to it at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, if you look at this list of names, Tommy, so Cifuentes, Hagi, Goldson, Lammers, Tavernier, Dessers, Cantwell.
You keep throwing Dessers in there when there's not been any real links with. You're just manifesting that, aren't you? You're just like, Dessers will go. He's going to go. I'm convinced of it, because
he actually confirmed there's been interest in him himself, but he wanted to stay. So there's definitely interest.
Craig's out there firing out DMs into people's. I'm Cyril Dessers' agent. The interesting thing of that list you've just given there, right? Cyril Dessers a wee question mark over him, but the interesting thing, if I caught the entire list correctly, is big names, been around the club, big earners, probably only one that's done anything. Maybe Goldson and maybe Tav, right? The rest of them, people like Hagi, etc., Cantwell, by and large, flatter to deceive. So it's transformative in terms of, and it's been the theme of the podcast, so we might as well come back to it, getting them out, not taking massive hits or making profits, getting them off the wage bill, retooling the squad. And that seems to be happening. So, again, as I always say, judge the window when it closes. But so far, so good. I think you're absolutely right, just to go back to the Goldson one. That was always going to be a case of, let's see what happens with Connor Goldson before we make a move centre-back or whatever. Because it all unlocks on that basis. Because if he was still here, he'd be a starting centre-back. So, I do also look forward, if the Harry Souttar one works, that we'll have Souttar and Souttar. But that's that'll be an interesting one for the commentator. But the list that you've rhymed off there, would anybody truly miss them?
I think you can also add to that in terms of the level of experience that is going out the door. You look at Barisic, Lundstrom, Jack. It's a lot of players that were on the team sheet every single week. So everyone's moaned about, actually, we're not getting enough players out the door. There's no real overhaul happening. We're not doing that. I think part of the reason why we've been so turgid in pre-season games has been because actually a lot of these experienced players are out the door or on their way out the door, and you're left. You can add Scott Wright in there as well, who's apparently heading off to the English Championship, if rumours are to be believed. But you've got a lot of a squad there that are either 1 foot out the door or already in their head gone. But until they actually physically leave, we can't then replace them. So I think that's been a problem in pre-season. I think also there's a lot of questions about Clement's style. Clement, is he implemented? We won't go over that ground again because we've done it to death, and I'm sure we'll continue to do it to death as we go through. But I think it's when you read the list out, actually, there's so much experience and so many of those big names that have failed to deliver that are actually leaving the club in the coming days and weeks, that the overhaul is happening. It's just not maybe happening as quickly as we would have initially liked it to, but it's definitely underway. Ross, just as a sort of final point of the podcast, we start to wrap it up. Niels Koppen has received a lot of positive praise around the moves, that in terms of getting people out the door and getting them out the door for good fees, in terms of Lammers, in terms of Cifuentes, Hagi getting an okay fee for him as well. How much of this is down to Koppen, do you think, in his experience being able to get those fees? The likes of, I guess, there was a criticism of Ross Wilson a lot of the time that he was just unable to do that. He wouldn't sell players at the right time. He wouldn't construct the squad in a way where there was that pipeline of people moving out the door. Are you encouraged by the fact that these players who are, in Cifuentes' case, massively out of the picture and on the other side of the world, and yet he's managing to help us get a €5 million fee? Now, I'm not saying that Koppen is the only one acting to get us those fees. There's a lot of people who act in transfers that kind of move towards getting that final agreed fee. But it doesn't encourage you that that's happening, and also the fact that we've got all these other players that seem to be lined up and ready to go as soon as players do head out the door.
Yeah, I think he is likely part of the committee that sets the fees for these players, and he'll be doing the squad analysis with Philippe Clement. He'll be sitting with Philippe Clement. I'm sure they would have sat down as soon as the season finished, and they would have looked at that squad and felt who Clement wanted to build that team around, who he was fine with keeping, and who had to go, right? So you'd like to think that Niels Koppen is acting on that this summer, and I think we've seen that so far. It's not always perfect, right? There might be players that stay around at Rangers this summer that maybe the manager was willing to let go of, but the interest wasn't there. But I think we've seen so far from Niels Koppen that he has a network. It's quite clear that he's got a network in terms of where we seem to be pulling players from, the type of profiles. Like, look at Anigamani, right? Highly rated in terms of all those kind of scouting markets that you read. Anigamani's always looked upon as like one of these kind of evolving talents. I think he was listed in like the top 10 under 23 forwards or whatever in the world, right? Whoever comes up with that list, I don't know, right? But you can tell that Koppen's got a network in there that he can bring players in, and he can go to certain agents and fight. And I think that's what we've needed for a while. We're coming towards the end of this podcast, but I could rant about this for ages. I remember having arguments last summer about Michael Beale. It was fine for Michael Beale to just handle the recruitment. Madness. That's why we're in the position we're in right now. We didn't have a director of football, and we let the manager with no experience handle our recruitment. Remember all the stories about him flying off and meeting players and all that? Manager shouldn't be doing that. That's mental. So I'm glad we've got a structure in place now where Koppen and his team, the recruitment team, can focus on bringing the players in that Clement, that fits kind of Clement's style and the type of profiles he's looking for, and Clement can focus on the team, because that's the way it should be. That's modern football. So overall, I think we've done really well to appoint Koppen. I think he's put a really good structure in place now. Again, Tommy said this before, you kind of have to sit back at the end of the window and judge how he's done. In the middle of it, it's kind of difficult. And then you obviously look at how successful Rangers have been this season. That's when you really mark Koppen, how well he's done. But director of football, I always think is a necessity. I thought it was the same with Ross Wilson. I always felt Ross Wilson get too much stick, to be honest. I mean, he was part of building a squad that you got the Europa League final, by the way. So I don't really understand sometimes how it's only the negatives that are looked upon and not the positives. But that structure in general has to be there. And it looks like we've got someone in there that understands the role and exactly what Rangers need to move forward in the long term.
Tommy, final word for you. Praise for Koppen justified at this stage?
Certainly looks positive. Again, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I judge the window at the end, and Niels Koppen would be getting a lot of flack if these players don't work out, because that's how it works. But right now, to not to overly bastardise what Ross has said, we've seen a spread in terms of network. We've went after different types of players. We have been really clear on what our recruitment strategy is. We've done the young players first. Now we're going after more experience, and probably more important for his reputation with the fans is he looks like he's able to get a good news story as players go out the door, and that's really important for Rangers because we have incredibly struggled with that over the last few seasons, and it's such an important thing. Turn around players who are either coming towards the end of contracts, not performing, or selling at the right time. These are some of the things that Niels Coppin will be judged on as well. So far, so positive.
Excellent, and that's a good way for us to end this podcast. Thank you very much to Ross and Tommy for joining us and giving us their views on the ins and outs at Rangers. There'll be plenty more twists and turns, I imagine, over the coming weeks, coming 5 weeks, I think it is, until the transfer window closes. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you have enjoyed the content, please do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the TII YouTube channel or wherever you're listening to the podcast on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. It helps us massively, but also means that you don't miss out on any of the TII content as we move through the season. There's plenty to come this weekend as well, so make sure you keep your eye out for that. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Until next time, goodbye.